Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here. Welcome back. So today what I want to do is Dr. Dan's History Primer 2023. I always do one of these at the beginning of the school year. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Earth, right? And we're going to talk about continents and countries real quick. So let me get this arranged. So first of all, this is a continent. This is North America, all right there. This is South America. This is a continent as well. This is Africa. Africa is a continent. Europe is a continent, all right. Let me spin this around without dropping the Earth. It would be tragic. Asia is a continent, so that's where China's at, all right. Here's Japan up in here. And then Australia is a continent. Australia is pretty unique because it's actually the only continent that's a country also. Okay, it's Australia's a country, it's a continent, it's the only one like that. I mean, the rest of these, like Europe, for example, when we talked about, we talked about Europe up here, right? Europe has got all kinds of countries in it. So, Germany, France, Spain, England, that's all Europe. Okay, so keep in mind, continents and countries are a different thing. We just covered the big continents. That'll be important to know. The other thing to know is dates. So when you're reading dates in history, not so much in our class because everything is modern, but if you're reading a date and it's got a CE or an AD behind it, it's common era. So the difference between BC and AD back in the day, before Christ, after Christ, is the way it used to be labeled. It's not anymore. And so if you see CE, common era, it's the same as AD, which is what used to be used. That's pretty easy. So there's that part. And then kind of just want to talk really quick about Dr. Dan's Evolving Laws of History. So here's kind of the way I look at history. And I think we can look at it differently. So my first law of history is that history is really the study of love, and it's the study of hate, tolerance, intolerance, understanding, sharing, experiencing, taking action, communicating, adapting, and destroying. And those are really kind of all elements of the human condition. It's really mostly about power. History is about power, and if you go back and look at the classical history about wars between dead white guys, they were all about powers, kingdoms trying to get more power, trying to get more powerful. Maybe today, if you pay attention to the war in Ukraine, that that's a power play by Putin and by Russia. It's all about power. There's nothing inherent about wars. So my second law of history is that if you have a country or a culture that has a broad disparity between rich and poor, and it goes on for a long time, like we have seen all the time, this country right now to some extent, but the disparity isn't that great. But historically, if you have a lot of poor people and then some very rich people, and the rich people are controlling the poor, you're going to have a revolution at some point. So that's kind of a law of history. It always happens. When people are starving and they don't have enough, they usually rise up against the people who are oppressing them. So that's my second law of history. My third law of history is that the discoverer of natural laws helps dispel myths. All right. So, when science, the scientific method was invented, and we could actually determine what made things happen, that changed a lot of things, a lot of myths as far as, we get sick if we sin or that sort of thing. A lot of those myths went away with science. So the third law of history for me is that the discovery of natural laws always helps dispel myths. So there's that. My fifth law of history is any regions or empires that have diverse cultures and religions are incredibly hard to rule for a long period of time. And we're not going to get into any real early European history, but if you look at Europe before the modern formations of France and Germany, for example, I mean, there was all kinds of little countries and little empires kind of vying for power all the time. So, diverse cultures and regions and languages, especially if nations are really big, they're hard to maintain. Big empires are hard to maintain, and I think England learned that. We're going to talk a little bit about England's colonies at the beginning of our class. England colonized India, for example. I mean, can you imagine that? So when you're trying to rule diverse cultures, it's really hard to hold it together, and it doesn't work. Okay, and I mean, you can contrast like England's empire when they were in control of England or in control of India and in control of Australia and Canada and all that stuff, and really compare it with someone like Japan, who's always been kind of insular. And easier, a country like that's easier to maintain because the people and the cultures are more similar. So that, if that makes any sense. And then finally, my seventh law of history, which I don't have a sixth, so I don't know why that is. But anyway, my seventh law of history is that if a country is in the middle of a depression and has lost confidence in the leadership, then the country is really ripe for revolution. So in other words, if the economy just tanks, for 10 years and 70% of the people are unemployed and everyone's starving, it won't be long before the people rise up against the government and make changes. Very similar to my second law of history, where I say the disparity between rich and poor is fodder for revolutions as well. So that's my quick down and dirty laws of history. You don't have to remember any of them. You don't have to remember any of it, but hopefully you'll find it helpful and interesting, and it'll help you with the class. Have a great day. Bye-bye.